All right, let's talk about the invisible rules that are running the smartest buildings we live and work in. You know, from your office to your apartment, these places are getting seriously intelligent, and we've got to talk about the regulations that are trying to keep pace. So, let's dive in.
I mean, just picture it for a second. A building that knows you need that morning coffee before you do, or that has a conference room perfectly set up for your team before you even walk in the door. It sounds like sci-fi, but behind all that amazing convenience is a super complex web of data and systems. And figuring out the right rules for it all, that's one of the biggest challenges we're facing today.
So here's how we're going to break it all down. First, we'll get a handle on what really makes a building smart. Then we'll get into the rules for energy and sustainability, tackle the huge issues of data and privacy, see how different countries are handling it, and finally take a look at what's coming next.
Okay, so what is a smart building, really? Because it's way more than just hooking up a few gadgets to the internet. We're talking about creating a totally unified, responsive environment. At the very core of it all is something called the Building Automation System, or BAS. This is the foundation, the layer that lets you centrally control pretty much everything. Your AC, the lights, the security cameras, and make sure all these different pieces can actually talk to each other and work together.
So if the BAS is the body's nervous system, then the Building Operating System, or BOS, is the actual brain. It's the smart software that grabs all that data from the BAS and starts making sense of it. This is what turns a bunch of separate automated parts into one single intelligent building.
And that leads us to the ultimate goal here, what we call cognitive buildings. Now, these aren't just automated, they're adaptive. They literally learn from the people inside them and respond in real time. It completely changes how we interact with the spaces around us. It's pretty wild. So now that we have an idea of what these buildings can do, let's get into one of the biggest reasons we need them in the first place: their massive environmental impact. And, you guessed it, the regulations being built to control it. 40%. Just let that sink in for a second. 40% of the entire world's greenhouse gas emissions come from our buildings. That is a staggering number, and it's exactly why smart, energy-efficient regulations aren't just a nice-to-have, they are absolutely critical.
But here's the really good news. The potential for savings here is just massive. I mean, check out this case study from a university campus. They used an AI solution to optimize their central utility plant, and the results were incredible: a 68% cut in emissions, and they saved $500,000 a year. This is exactly why these regulations are being pushed so hard. The results speak for themselves.
Of course, to pull off that kind of crazy efficiency, smart buildings have to collect an enormous amount of data. And that brings us to our next major challenge: striking that critical balance between the need for security and our fundamental right to privacy.
You've got this constant tug-of-war happening. On one side, the building needs data for security, controlling who gets in, monitoring for threats. But on the other side, the people inside have a right to privacy. Their data needs to be anonymous and collected only if they say it's okay.
And that balancing act gets even more precarious when you throw artificial intelligence into the mix. AI can do some incredible things, but it also brings a whole new set of risks to the table, including very human-like things like making mistakes and having biases. These right here are the big risks that regulators are scrambling to figure out. You've got things like AI washing, which is basically companies overhyping their tech. But then there are the more serious ones, like algorithms that have real-world biases baked right in. In a building, that could mean an access system unfairly flagging certain people, or even an HVAC system that decides executive offices are more important to keep comfortable than other workspaces. And look, this isn't just some theoretical what-if problem. This stuff is happening right now. The U.S. Federal Trade Commission actually went after Rite Aid for using a biased facial recognition system that was falsely flagging women and people of color as shoplifters. It's a really stark reminder of the real-world harm that can happen when AI goes unregulated. So, with stakes this high, how are governments around the world actually dealing with this? Well, it's complicated. There's no single rule book. Instead, what we're seeing is this global patchwork of totally different approaches. You can really see two very different philosophies at play. The European Union has gone for a comprehensive top-down strategy with these huge regulations like GDPR and the EU AI Act that apply to everyone. But then you look at North America, and it's much more of a patchwork, with a mix of national, state, and even local rules. You can imagine how complex that gets for companies trying to roll out tech in different places. So where is all of this headed? Well, technology is definitely not standing still, and neither are the regulations. We're on this clear evolutionary path, from the smart systems we have today to the truly cognitive buildings of tomorrow.
Yeah. The journey for a building operating system follows this really clear path. We started out with the foundational systems, basic automation. Right now, we're kind of in the future stage with deeper intelligence. But the ultimate goal, the moonshot, is a building that's self-aware, that can fix itself, and can physically adapt to its environment.
And listen, there is a massive economic incentive to get this all right. The smart building market is already worth over $100 billion today, and it's projected to nearly triple in just the next decade. This kind of explosive growth means all those tricky regulatory questions we've been talking about, they're becoming more urgent every single day. And this brings us to one last really vital question. As our buildings become cognitive, as they learn, predict, and adapt, we're not just programming systems anymore. We are, in a very real way, designing behavior. So who should be responsible for writing their conscience?